Get down, get down, get down, get down, get down, get funky. Woo-hoo. Is there any 70s blaxploitation horror film more entertaining than 1973's Scream, Blacula Scream? I ask you. I mean, come on, people. What are we doing here? You know, I have to tell you that I actually got scared a little during this movie. It's true. I mean, how about that scene where that really dumb chick with the giant afro? Oh, who am I kidding? Everyone in this film has a giant afro. But how about that scene where she just waltzes into Blacula's house and goes up the stairs? Was that the Psycho house? And boom! Blacula floats towards her attackingly with his fangs out and his cape agape. Jumpin' jerry curls! I think I actually shrieked like a girl. Ah! If not poop my ass, how did they do that? Was he on 2 skateboards? Listen, that Blacula's a hell of a lot creepier than that Twilight pussy with the pouty glossy lips. Fuck Twilight! Fuck Twilight! And that's why I really loved Scream, Blacula Scream. This was old school shit, baby! Vampires was scary again all of a sudden. Damn! And that William Marshall, who plays Blacula, is a very commanding actor. You totally buy his power over his funky fangin' followers. I had no idea how much I've been missing long black and red capes. I don't really understand why these movies were deemed blaxploitative. Are black people being exploited here? The actors agreed to do the film, did they not? They certainly appear to be enjoying themselves in front of the camera. I mean, most of the black folks in this movie don't come off like offensive, dumb jigaboos at all. Slaves, servants, or criminals, or rappers. These are refined people here. They drink wine, they collect rare African art, they socialize respectably. Some of them even talk in British accents. They even dine in outdoor cafes with hanging ferns. Hanging ferns! So what's exploitive here? Isn't it all just show business? I think I'm confused about what is considered exploitation, blaxploitation, et al. Something tells me Mummy and Grim and the Hawk will be able to help me sort this out. Sure, there's a few Coors Slug and Jive turkeys here and there, but for the most part, Scream, Blacula Scream only made me want to be a black person. I love black people. When I was growing up, Richard Pryor was my comedy god, a black man. I learned from black people. Black people are brilliant in the arts, my life field of choice. Black people taught me to dance. Fuck Dick Clark and his old dead ass. I watched Soul Train growing up, motherfucker. And I know I'm supposed to be colorblind, but I can't help but tell the difference, aesthetically, between a black person and a white person. I'm a cartoonist, for fuck's sake. It's my business. I love buying different skin tone Prismacolor markers because I love and respect all kinds of skin colors. And I loves me a black-ass Dracula. I want more black monsters. My favorite scene in the movie, hands down, was when Blacula had transformed the Renfield dude who broke the bird's neck into a vampire, and the brother could not process the fact that his visage no longer casts a reflection in the mirror. Hey, Blacula, what's this, man? You got something to do with this, man?
I'm afraid that's one of the misfortunes of the cursed.
Hey, look here, man. You mean to tell me I ain't never gonna see my face again? Hey, look, man, I don't mind being a vampire and shit, but this really ain't hip. I mean, a man has got to see his face. Ain't that a bitch? Woohoo! I love the script. This was my kind of movie. Scream, Blacula Scream was sexy, fun, and alive. Now, I have no idea what the correlation here is supposed to be between voodoo cultism and vampirism, but it didn't matter. This was cinematic soul food. And I eat at soul food kitchens out here all the time, so I know. Do you have any idea how juicy and delectable Angelina's Southern Fried Chicken is? Well, then you are missing out, motherfucker! I love the terrible, mismatched opening credits theme song. I love that all the cars were sponsored by the Chrysler Corporation. I like that Blacula actually wanted his demons exhumed from him. He was tired! After all, didn't he seem bored and resentful that he was even brought back? And maybe he didn't want to kill anyone anymore. I mean, he was something of a crank, don't you think? Look how stately he barked at the other members of his nest. Self-loathing anyone? Or am I digging too deep? Scream, Blacula Scream was a riot, and Pam Grier is so smoking hot, I would invite her to squat over my glass coffin while I was inside it and evacuate her sweet waste all over me, as long as the coffin could be safeguarded from leaks. I'm giving this motherfucking movie 4-ass motherfucking stars.
Wow.
I'm definitely putting a jive funk track to your review there.
Put the What's Happening theme song.
Need some Lalo Schifrin over that bitch.
Oh my god. Hey, I do agree with you on the Pam Grier thing, man. I love looking at Pam Grier.
I agree, except that I wouldn't want her shitting on me.
Yeah, here. Hey, I actually really like this movie more than I thought I was going to like it too, man. And I thought it was actually it was scarier than I thought it was going to be too. Yeah, go for it, man.
I said right.
I was scared of the cartoon bat.
Oh my god, it was like a Scooby-Doo
It was a
episode.
Scooby-Doo bat. It was totally. No, I really dug. I gotta say, I love Pam Grier movies in general. This was not like one of my favorite of that period. I thought the opening was great, the voodoo ceremony that the guy was doing, and all of that. But yeah, I got a little bored with it after a while. But
Well, one thing that I did learn about voodoo ceremonies is that it's appropriate to pop open a can of Coors immediately following a voodoo ceremony.
that's what I.
Hey,
I also wrote down that line that you said, Max. What do you mean that this ain't hip? A man has got to see his face.
And I
Isn't
love-
that brilliant?
Yeah, it's great.
and
Man.
Max, you didn't once use the term "hey blood" in your review. Which was a very popular saying at the time. Mummy, I want to ask you this about blaxploitation, because Max brought up the point of it doesn't seem like there's anything.
It's exploitative.
But hold on. Did the term itself, blaxploitation, did this come along later or when they were making?
Yeah, later, man.
Okay.
Look, dude, the term exploitation comes from like the beginnings of cinema, where I was sort of like touching on it before, and Billy, I don't know, you probably know more about it than I do, but these carnival guys had to figure out a way to survive, and so what they were outside of the system. And so what they would do would be that they would take these traveling road shows with these pictures, or they would just rent independent theaters. It was called four-walling, I guess is the technical term of it. And they had to make something that was different than what's happening in Hollywood.
Uh-huh.
And so what happened is they start making these the sex hygiene movie is basically, I think, is the start of it. And they saw that was drew audiences in. So when the major stopped making, and the major studios started doing the sex hygiene pictures, but when they stopped, they picked it up right from there, and then they started looking for other areas to exploit, and it became drugs and vice and gambling and nudism and the sex stuff and all that stuff. They were exploiting those things that the Hollywood things couldn't film or wouldn't film. It was basically self-imposed censorship. And that went on from basically the 20s, from what I understand, to about the 50s, and then things started loosening up a little bit. And in the 60s, with the repeal or whatever, I don't even know all that much about the Hays Code, but with the demise of the Hays Code, all those theaters started going out, and then it started becoming the grindhouse cinema, which were the city, 42nd Street, San Francisco, LA. They have these grindhouse places. And so it became more about an independent film movement. It started with it started becoming about, it kind of had a slow metamorphosis where it was like the foreign films, because they were able to do, the sex stuff. And then the grindhouse stuff started popping up in these grindhouse movies, movie houses, kung fu, sexploitation, the foreign films, like I said, softcore porn, deep throat, that stuff.
And Joe, they got the Grindhouse name because they were next to go-go joints. The theaters were next to go-go joints, and they got the name from like the bump and grind dance that the chicks would do.
Right. Yeah. So they were grinding on film. So what exploitation was basically a holdover term for anything that films were doing that was outside of the mainstream. So were they, is it obviously exploiting? It's different. They're not educating at the same time, quote unquote, educating people about these evils of society while, really exploiting, these things. It's just basically taking a subject matter that Hollywood just was staying away from for one reason or another, and, it's taking Hollywood weren't making black films, and that's where this came from. They weren't making sex films, kung fu films, obviously, and then you get into those subgenres like splatter films and I think there's the Nazi exploitation.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's a whole list of them.
Yeah, so I mean, it's sort of a it's basically splitting hairs and it's semantics at this point, but it took the term exploitation because it's doing something that Hollywood's not doing.
Yeah, it made me think a lot, Joe. Doing it, watching this film and learning about this film. I mean, and you just said there weren't really any black filmmakers in Hollywood. Melvin Van Peebles, who was probably the most popular blaxploitation director at that time, was around. But he was working outside the system. So if you really think about it, it wasn't until Spike Lee comes along before there's a real black filmmaker making big Hollywood movies.
Yeah, Sidney Poitier was doing it within the system,
but he was making movies like Stir Crazy, which is fine. But he wasn't making,
Sidney Poitier?
Yeah, he directed Stir Crazy. Don't ask me how I know that, but it's.
But I mean, he was doing it on a more respectable level. Raisin in the Sun, To Start With Love.
He was directing.
He wasn't directing, but he was pushing for. He was basically championing the roles of black people in cinema inside the studio system.
But he wasn't directing. He wasn't being put in charge of a film. He might have had some say with what little power they gave him, but he wasn't in charge of sets.
No, he wasn't directing, but yeah, he was championing it. I mean, really, I don't think like a lot of this blaxploitation are coming from white filmmakers, and that's could technically be termed exploitative,
right? If it is, yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, like the black people are empowered and everything, and it's a black drama and everything, but I doubt black people were I wasn't all conscious in the early 70s or whatever, but I'm sure that they weren't as cartoonish as what's being presented here. You know what I mean? So again, splitting hairs. I mean, it's a little bit of exploitation there, black culture, don't you think?
I get the feeling that this director for BLACULA SCREAM was a white dude.
I think so. I don't know, man. Bob
Kelvin. Because I looked up some of the acting that he did, and he was on the Twilight Zone. He was on one of their episodes, and his character's name was Boris on the episode he was on. And that doesn't really sound like a black name to me, right?
No.
So.
Interestingly, man, all these grindhouse movies, quote unquote exploitation movies, they all started crossing over into one another. And dude, Sweetback's Badass Song is a great film, man. Right. I mean, just hands down, it's a fantastic film. And the blaxploitation starts crossing over into horror,
right.
And then you have your rape exploitation or whatever. And this guy who directed this film, Bob Kelvin, he 2 years later directed a film, and this is just an interesting note for everyone who's listening to our show. He directed a film called Act of Vengeance, which a rapist goes around in a hockey mask, and this is almost like 5 or 6 years earlier than Friday the 13th. Yeah, so I mean, that it's just an interesting little tidbit that this dude.
That's very interesting, Joe.
Yeah.
So he probably wouldn't be Team Jason then. He'd probably be a little bit upset. He'd probably be more on the Team Michael side.
Yeah, I believe that might be the case.
That's what you're saying. Bill, you want to weigh in a little bit about Scream, Blackula Scream?
It's hard for me to judge the social significance of all that stuff. I know the NAACP was lobbied pretty hard to get blaxploitation films stopped, try to get them stopped from being made. And I mean, I know Spike Lee has railed against a lot of it, and it's hard for me to say. It's not. I feel a little bit like it's not my business, Okay. But I know that Melvin Van Peebles said it right on. He hit it right on the head. He said Hollywood isn't black and Hollywood isn't white. Hollywood is green, and it was a way certainly for a lot of people to at least be seen in cinemas, and at least to kind of have to force their way into the public consciousness in a way that you can reflect on and criticize, rightfully so. But it also makes people aware. It made white people aware of what was going on in black ghettos in a way that I think they were totally oblivious to. And again, it has to do with that double, the heads and tails sides of the coin, where yes, it's exploitation, and yes, it's also showing you a side of life that you would otherwise be ignoring, and it's being shown to you in a very cheeseball entertainment exploitative way. So I know this is kind of reaching and a little bit intellectualizing the whole thing, but I think that one of the mechanisms of society itself is that enfranchisement, at least in America, has to go through an intermediary stage of exploitation before a group of people
assimilates.
Assimilation has to go through a stage of exploitation. I can't think of any example where that hasn't happened, and it's painful to look at in retrospect sometimes, but it just seems inevitable.
Right. It almost, you have to demonize the quote unquote the other, in order to come to terms.
And for instance, in Freaks, I love exploitation films. I don't know why, but they just really, really appeal to me on a deep level. And the similarity between blaxploitation and Freaks is that you're casting these characters who are on the fringes of a white middle-class society in America, and you're forcing them in front of these people, but in a cartoony, caricaturized way that at least is entertaining and exploitative, and yet afterward you're not afraid to look at that as much as you were before. And that's the gimmick of exploitation, is you're paying to see something that is the other, and in a weird way it makes you not afraid of it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it taps into the fears of the bourgeois middle class society, where there's a safety, and I don't know if it's making it safe, if the original intention was making it safe for people to do that, but it was gratifying their fears and maybe their secret desires. I guess if you want to get Freudian about it, but I mean, it's basically demonizing and not Freak so much, but in a way, it's like holding it up as a geek show and kind of making it, you can look at these people and feel safe about looking at these people and feeling safe that you're not them in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And so, that, I mean, they did that with definitely in the beginnings of exploitation, and I think you can make. I think you can make arguments for that, with kung fu and even the Nazi exploitation and these deviant sexual behavior. Like they present it like, all right, so say sexploitation, for instance, they present it as something that, oh my God, we would never do something like that, so why don't we come and stare at it because we're better than it, but all the while we're getting off on watching these people getting off. You know what I mean?
And I think we talked about it a bit, I think, in the last episode, which is that exploitation and horror, are hand in hand because they give a society kicks that the society can't get in real life.
Exactly.
You can't go murder and steal and rape everything in sight. So you go to a movie and eat popcorn, and it's become entertainment to relieve you of those neuroses in a Freudian way. So like the Pam Grier movies, the crime movies, and all that stuff. The consistent theme throughout exploitation, again from Freaks all the way up into the blaxploitation movies, is partially revenge fantasy. And in blaxploitation, a lot of white people were going to those movies, and the villains were always rich white guys, and they were always getting shotgunned by black people from who were being oppressed by them, and all of that. And so it was very basic, guttural level revenge fantasy. But along the way, I love the Jack Hill, Pam Grier movies, because along the way, they were also fitting in these very subtle commentaries about, these were black people in these movies who came from the places that they were that these movies took place in, and they were filling them with these tiny little details of reality about how drug dealers behaved and about
exactly.
They were voicing these minor little realities that no one would have heard of otherwise.
And even that crosses over into the rape horror exploitation. What does a rape look like, and what do and what does it look like when a woman is empowered after she's raped and goes and kills people? Like I just actually watched I Spit on Your Grave in preparation for this, you know? And I mean, it's brutal, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal.
It's almost impossible to watch that movie.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time just watching, and at the same time, it's like a freak show. You want to look away, but you got to look at it.
And a lot of feminists have championed rape revenge films in a weird way because it brings to light the subject to start with, and second, empowers the women in part of it. And I don't agree with that. I mean, I will say that personally, I think that that's kind of a silver lining type of argument.
It gets kind of ridiculous.
But there's a validity to it.
Yeah, a good example of in the rape and revenge category is where they a film where they do something a little bit different, and this is considered exploitation. As I did the research, was The Accused with Jodie Foster. How I mean, it's just
Yeah, because they're saying they're bringing you into the theater to see the evils of rape, but they're spending so much time, and there's just something about the nature of cinema and the gratification of watching something that makes watching that rape pleasurable. So at the same time,
in a weird way, sugarcoating.
It's weird, man, because they're showing you something so terrible and so horrible, and they're bringing you in there to see this thing that's impossible or alien or strange or scary or dangerous, and then they get you in there, and then you find that you take pleasure in watching it. I mean, there's a really perverse side of humanity that goes and takes pleasure in these things that are outside of quote unquote the normal middle class American life.
To bring it back to Scream, Blacula Scream, I enjoyed the movie for the most part, but I do think that it's not horror in the and this is a thing that I is going to be a running theme through this whole episode, and seems to be through our whole show, but it's kind of horror.
I think it is.
It's universally classified as horror. Max mentioned earlier that he was frightened, and with some of the scenes. And again, Billy, you're right. Let's bring it back to the film itself. There's one scene, the party scene, where Blacula attacks the one chick that's kind of like looking at herself in the mirror, and he sneaks up on her, and she can't see him. And I found that to be like a very effective and very scary scene.
Really, I agree, Tom. It's really brilliantly done, man.
And Max, I back you up 100%. William Marshall is the Blacula?
Correct.
He's such a solid performer. It's hilarious. Like, you want to see him in a better budgeted movie. You want to see him in a more complex role a little bit. He's great in this. Don't get me wrong, but you want to see him in other stuff.
Right.
He's got such a strong presence.
Well, any actor that can pull off spirit gummed crepe hair on his face
that was
strong.
That was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Max, did you dig that mirror scene when he attacks that chick that's sitting there?
Yeah, and I just want to say that you guys sound really good on Vicodin and Beaujolais.
We're glad we're entertaining.
You guys are
He's having the time of his life.
If you guys, the listeners, if you have Vicodin, a prescription, because I have a legitimate prescription, so I'm not endorsing drug use by any stretch, but I have to take Vicodin. If you listen to these fuckers talk, they've got very deep, broad minds, and you could like ride the wave with them, and it's really awesome.
When we're done recording, I'm just going to play this all back and smoke a joint and see what you're talking about, Max.
Well, I'm definitely smoking a joint after the show. That's usually what I do
I'm
anyway.
gonna smoke a joint after the shows. Shows?
Hey.
More than one?
Hey, there's that scene, Tom,
Yeah.
that you're talking about. It really does deserve to be looked at. I mean, it's actually really is frightening, and it's actually really well directed.
Yeah.
Billy, did you get the camera movement on there is something that I've actually. Yeah, it's great, man. I mean, it's something that I've definitely noted to use. Actually, there's a couple of instances in the films that we're watching, and that was one of them, man. You see how does it work? Blackula's approaching him from behind, and
Her.
her, and she starts to turn slowly from Blackula's point of view, and then you flip around to the other side, to the reverse angle, and then the camera's panning as if it's her point of view, and it pans into Blackula's face. It's really, really effective, man.
Yeah.
It's actually a really brilliant stroke of camera work and editing right there, man. And it took me back, man. I was like, Jesus, this is a better. I couldn't believe that it was a better film than I actually thought it was.
It's so funny to watch such a well-directed scene, and then like 3 minutes later, he's morphing into a bat outside of the party, and some drunken dude.
Let's go get a pizza. Shaggy shows up. In that.
Yeah, right. I know, it's funny. There was another instance though that was frightening, Tom and Max. It was very similar to that where Blackula's closing in on somebody, but I can't.
There's a scene at a party that I thought was really well done, and I can't remember exactly how it worked, but it must be after he attacks the woman upstairs, because I don't really remember that one. But everyone's downstairs, and the woman who's been attacked upstairs stumbles down the stairs.
Yeah.
And then someone notices her in the background.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, those are some of my favorite scenes, is where it's the delayed horror reaction, where there's a normal everyday sort of thing that's supposed to be happy and cheery. And Joe, you and I talked about this in Jaws a little bit, the Jaws episode, which is that when you interrupt the everyday with something that people aren't quite sure of if it's actually happening or not, it has a really powerful effect, you know?
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Yeah.
That's a good scene too.
So, am I the only one here with black envy?
I don't.
I don't know how to answer that, actually.
Yeah, I'm not.
I really adore you, but I feel like sometimes you're very uncomfortable with me. Is that true?
I love you, Max. I think my stock answer is, oh my God, is that a herd of cattle coming through the room?
Why does it...
Yep, those are the cow. No, man. No, I love it. I think it's great. I love that you ask uncomfortable questions, man. I think it's fascinating. Man. I actually haven't ever thought about it. I don't know how to respond, so that might explain my level of discomfort.
No, Max, it is a fascinating question, because like people, I've heard explicitly say that, yeah, and I actually have never thought about it. You're the first person to ever ask that question.
Is that true?
Yeah, I've never given it any thought at all.
I have a new microphone that's supposed to not make me sound so feminine. Or a girl, or high pitched.
Well, when you say it that way, Max.
Oh my God. Cutting this is
Well, what is Black Envy, Max, and how do you
just
how does
people
it
are just so
Cool.
funny and cool, and they're just so musical, and their communication skills. Like, I went to this brunch the other day, and I'm sitting there with a bunch of pasty white folks like me, and
At the Eclectic Cafe?
Correct, Thomas. Wow, good memory. And this black chick like had a fold 'em up stroller, and it crashed into us because she leaned it up against the wall wrongly. And I'm sorry. Can you believe that just happened? Oh my! I mean, it was like a whole show she gave us, and it was so entertaining and fun. And it's like, wow, she's just cutting through the lines, man. She's just going for the jugular and being honest and being herself. And oh, white people are so fucking uptight. It's like they got a splintery wooden board up their shitholes or something. I don't know.
I can offer you this answer. I experienced a great deal of white self-loathing for a time, but everything that I have, every prejudice that I've ever had, essentially boils down to misanthropy, which I just hate people. I hate humans in general. So, starting, but it's essentially self-loathing, right? So it boils down to self-loathing, and it's human beings. It's not like, you know. So I don't want to be anyone else. It's just that everyone annoys me. So
I think generally, the difference is that they just seem to be more comfortable. And you're right, white people are so uptight. I mean, think about it. I mean, in this country, basically the white people, have the money and they fence each other off, and with their housings, and they live so far apart from each other. And black people who generally are a bit poor in this culture, they live with each other. It's like your neighbors are basically living with you because everything is so close. So they develop a closeness and a comfortableness.
But that's a double-edged sword, man.
I don't think that's true at all. I think that's I'm sorry, Tom. I just being honest. I think that's a bad stereotype.
What's that, Bill?
I think that's a stereotype, and I don't think that's necessarily true at all.
That's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Well, it's a generalization.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's a generalization. In my opinion.
But anyway, I mean, listen, man. Every culture has its pros and cons, man. I mean, you could just be saying the same thing about, I don't know, Kazakhstanians or something.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I live in a neighborhood that's predominantly Caribbean. Prior to that, I lived in Livingston, New Jersey, which was predominantly Jewish and Asian. Prior to that, I lived in Boston in a neighborhood that was predominantly South American. And, I mean, I've lived everywhere, and I've traveled all over the place. I spent a month in India, and I don't see very much difference. When you boil human behavior down, no one is really that different. And
yeah, I mean,
that you start
Jewish people have good sandwiches. I mean, there's pasta in Italy. I mean, everybody's got different.
And everyone. The thing is, generalizations and stereotypes develop specifically because you spend more time around people like you than around people who are not like you. So you start looking over the fence at other people and start picking out the differences. When if you mingled more, you'd realize we behave exactly the same way.
That's that, Billy. Do you not have the same amount of love for people that you do of hate?
Yeah, he just said he hated people. Now he's defending people.
And you know what? I
Thomas,
makes no sense. And
I was trying.
Call me as like I'm stereotyping people. I am generally saying that's true. What I said, but it is fucking true.
But
White
it's
people
not true.
It's for those types of reasons.
Here's the thing, Tom, and here's the problem with generalizations. Any generalization you apply to any one group of people, you will find an example of another group of people to which it also applies. So everything that you just said about black people, I can show you a town in Texas somewhere where all the white people behave that way also, and a town in Mexico where all the Mexican people behave.
I grew up poor. You don't have to tell me.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, and it's not an insult.
I grew up extremely poor, and I lived on top of people, and I know people, I understand people. But what I was driving at was the reason why white people are so uptight is because we don't, a lot of white people don't want to experience, the closeness with other people.
Not a close sense of community, is your perspective.
They put fences in between their fucking properties, and they make sure that they keep to their own business. They don't want to know other people's business. They fence themselves off. That was my point.
Yeah, I get that, and I wouldn't necessarily classify that as a white thing. I know that it's an American problem for sure,
it's an
and it's partially an economic problem within America.
Yeah, and
but
who has the money, Bill?
Well, and that's the thing. But here's
In
the
this
point that I'm
country,
trying to make. That
who has the money?
yes, and I get that. However, comma, in another day and age, it's going to be a different group of people. You know,
Right.
it's like it'll be the Persians one day again, and it'll be the Ethiopians one day again. You know, it's like I guarantee you, once upon a time, at the height of the Egyptian Empire, you know, the Hebrews were looking at the Egyptians, going, "Oh, look at them, the rich fucking Egyptians. They fence themselves off, and they have no social life." You know. So I just don't. I think race has so little to do with human behavior, and I think generalizations just don't work.
but
You
I don't
guys,
know about that, man.
I don't like. Go, Joe. Go ahead.
I still want to know that Billy doesn't have any love for humanity in the same commensurate to the amount of hate that he has for it.
Hey, sorry guys, I totally had to bail out there. Did I?
you know what that is, Joseph? That's you as a daddy. You have a newfound love. Not that you ever, maybe you didn't love humanity in the past, but you're a daddy now, and you've got little mummy, and you see hope and good things in
No,
humans.
I was always like that, Mac.
Really?
I don't think I've changed my worldviews that drastically since being a father. Yeah, but listen, here's the thing, guys. I don't know why we're talking about race here, but we are. So, yeah, okay. So,
It's important.
Listen, stereotypes come along for certain reasons. It's because there's certain characteristics that are inherent in certain cultures. This is nothing to be ashamed of. And there are good characteristics that are inherent in certain cultures, and there are bad characteristics that are inherent in certain cultures. I'm an Italian. I am very well aware of the characteristics that are not looked upon fondly in Italian people, and I'm very aware of the characteristics in Italian people that are, lauded by people or envied by certain other groups. And I'm not going to speak for any other group for just to not offend anybody, but I think that it's inherent in every single ethnic group, and we live in America. And because we're humans and basically tribal by nature, our first defense mechanism is to size up the other person and to put and file them away and put our list of what we know about them as a group, which is a stereotype, but stereotypes come about for reasons. And not to say everybody follows every stereotype, and we were just talking about this before, Max, the reasons why I don't watch The Sopranos or listen to Bruce Springsteen. You know what I mean? It's the same shit. It's the same bullshit that Americans are struggling with and are too friggin' juvenile to come to terms with. So there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think that our differences should be goofed on with one another. Like I think you should be goofing on me for certain Italian characteristics, and I think that you should be not afraid to say, wow, that's really cool that you blah, 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 do this on blah, 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 or why you do this or whatever, because of my...
Yeah, but I also wish I was Italian, so I wish...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I also wish sometimes that I was, an actor in LA. You know what I mean? And there's certain times where I'm like, geez, I'm glad I'm not an actor in LA. You know what I mean? Which I'm sure you feel about, Italians. Like, God, I'm glad that I'm not a blah, blah, blah Italian. You know what I mean? So everybody's so uptight about it, but the question remains, Billy, do you not have the same amount of love for humanity that you do hate for them?
Yeah, totally. And you just because I confess to my misanthropy is irrelevant. As much misanthropy as I have overwhelming affection. It's just exactly what you said. The human behavior itself is contradictory. So, yeah, I absolutely have as much love. I can't, my misanthropy can't overwhelm that,
Like, it's a thing that I'm sure we're fans of that, the Mark Maron podcast, Billy. Like, I think he's brought this up a couple of times. Like, on certain days, you'll see one person will a stereotype A, and you'll be like, God, like, all right. Let's
Let me. Can I jump? Can I kind of cut in front of you there a second? Is that I'm very well aware of the prejudices that I have because I'm completely flawed and I'm I'm a human being. I'm still an animal whose nervous system is wired to be prejudicial, and I could get really deep into prejudices because
I feel the same way, Billy.
Yeah,
I hear you.
and if you don't admit your prejudices, and
That's the problem.
if you don't have the ability to goof on them, as Joe was saying, then you're again, psychology, you're starting to repress it, and you're starting to cause more problems than if you just got it out on the surface and admitted it, And to come back around to exploitation films, I think culturally, these movies are that confession. They're the confession of a culture to say, this is how we feel and this is what we want, and we're ashamed of it, but we're going to pay money to watch it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's part of horror, too. I mean, horror is admitting the murderous impulse that's wired into the spiral ladder of our DNA to go out and stick our fangs into something's neck, and
and we don't want to admit it, but
we pay $10 to go see someone spill sugar syrup.
And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of cinema, that it allows us entrance into taking part into those acts that we're afraid of.
Political correctness will never work properly. Political correctness is a salve for people who are too timid to go to exploitation film.
Right, and it's why we need exploitation and why we need horror.
And why
I was going to ask Matt Farnsworth, who bailed on us. I was going to say, did you enjoy coming up with ways to kill people cathartically, internally, for your own personal self?
Yeah, I mean that's
the whole. That's it exactly.
That's the point.
Listen,
because we never want to do it. It goes back to when I was first on this thing. We never want to do it ourselves. But if you're making a horror film and you're the writer director and you get to kill people, look what you get to do.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, you get to control your world. And that's something from a filmmaker standpoint, Billy, and just from an artist standpoint, Max. Actually, and Tom, anything that you write or create, it's controlling the world in a way that you want to control it. So you get to seek out your viewer or the person who reads you or watches you perform or whatever the case may be gets to live that. You get to control it. So it's actually living. It's
you're God. I mean, you become to get a little highfalutin here. Shakespeare said, "As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods," and we're the gods of the little worlds we create in the writing a short story or whatever, And
absolutely.
it's, I mean, in a weird way, I do think it's therapeutic. If more people wrote short stories, maybe they wouldn't go bomb other countries so much.
Absolutely.
You're right. The director is playing God in a lot of ways, but I mean, in Scream, Blacula Scream, it's a white guy being the god of a black world, which is
there's a problem there. There is a problem there, because it doesn't become about wish fulfillment or finding anything deeper. It becomes about making the buck.
Okay, but what about the cast, Joe? What about the cast?
Yeah, you know what, man? It's great. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's so much fun, man. I mean, those mustaches are amazing.
Yeah, but are they feeling it? Are they feeling what you're saying with the white director? Are they feeling that, or are they committed and creating a reality with him?
It's funny you mentioned that, Max, because Pam Grier didn't seem into it at all. I'm serious. I just found.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I found her performance
amazing
very stale. Yeah,
in like Coffee or Foxy Brown.
Like disconnected a little bit, right?
Yeah,
well, listen,
exactly, Max. Yeah, she is. She seems disconnected from everything that's going on.
Yeah,
and that probably has a lot to do with it.
Or
everything to do with it.
If you want a cheap social commentary on it, I just think you can't judge a time and place. Of course, there should be more women directors. There should be more black directors. There should be more Asian. Like, it just should be. No one should just give a fuck about who's directing the movie. If they're a good director, they're a good writer. Just give the best person the best job, right? But to sort of retrospectively criticize that time and place, I think it's kind of nonsense. I mean, it was what it was,
Yeah.
Hey guys, listen, we're gonna bring it to an end, but this is a very powerful discussion on so many levels, and I really appreciate everyone's words and everyone's wisdom and everyone's thoughts. It was a great conversation. But let's let's get to some ratings on Scream, Blacula Scream, and I'm going to start, with my very good friend, the evil Reverend Billy Grimm, on this one. Billy, give me a rating for Scream, Blacula Scream.
I'm probably going to be the low man here. I'm going to give it 2 stars. I didn't think it was that scary, and I love me some Pam Grier movies, and it was not my favorite. I just thought it was just sort of apathetic. 2 stars.
Gotcha. Max.
Well, I started with 4, but after this giant, amazing conversation on Vicodin, I think I might have to go down to 3.
You went down.
You guys are amazing. I love listening to you guys. Do you understand that you don't come off as annoying, long-winded fuckers? Like, I listen to every word. This is weird. I don't like listening to people, but I'm listening to you because you guys really know your shit.
When you're on Vicodin, we do.
Hey, Mummy, what are you thinking about Scream, Blacula Scream?
Man, it's a 3-star film, but I will say this, and I'm only gonna crowbar this in.
Oh yeah,
because I actually watched the first Blacula, and it's basically the same movie, so I'm gonna have to drop it a 0.5 star. The original Blacula is 3 stars, and this is 2.5. I mean, it's got all the pitfalls of bad acting and dialogue and all that stuff, and it manages to be entertaining and sometimes even a little bit frightening despite all that. So, hey man, I was surprised because I had never seen it before. I was surprised at how much I liked it, man. So
Me too.
I wanted to like it more, and unfortunately, I'm not as certainly not as enthusiastic as Max is. But I don't think it's a terrible movie. I think it needs help in a lot of the performances, and it's a bit ridiculous at times, in a bad way, not in a cool way. but I think it's a fair accomplishment, and I'm going to give it 2 stars, just like Billy, man. All right, guys, that concludes Scream, Blacula Scream, and we're going to keep moving on in this this very emotional exploitation topic here tonight, man. We have emotions going everywhere, and it's awesome. The evil Reverend Billy Grimm is up next. He's going to introduce Takashi Miike's 2001 cult classic, Ichi the Killer. The evil Reverend Billy Grimm is coming at you now.